There are some people who say Abraham Lincoln was about as racist as a man could get. He believed slavery was morally wrong, but that had nothing to do with his view of the slaves themselves. In 1858, when Abraham Lincoln defeated Stephen Douglas, Lincoln made his opinion very clear. He said that he was not in favor of bringing about any social and political equality between white and black people. Here's another thing many people don't know about Lincoln. He was a tremendous supporter of colonization and may have believed that if the entire continent of Africa were colonized by United States citizens, the problem of slavery would just vanish. Number 7. Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was one of the greatest inventors in human history, and yet he was also one of the most disturbed. Tesla had all kinds of strange ideas about how the world should operate, and even had plans on how to put those ideas into motion. For example, Tesla said in the 1930s that criminals should be forcibly sterilized, and so should the mentally ill. He said that in the past, those who survived were always the fittest. But because of man's newly discovered sense of pity, the unfit continue to be bred when they should be restricted from having children. He also suggested making marriage impossible for criminals. Number 6. Einstein. In the 1980s, Evan Walker Harris published an article in Physics Today. The American physicist suggested in his article that Einstein was not the genius we believe him to be. He said that Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric, was the silent co-author of his paper on special relativity in 1905. He insists Einstein couldn't figure it out on his own and needed help from his wife, and then he never acknowledged that she had helped and went on to later divorce her. He may have stolen his wife's idea, then ghosted her. This paper was immediately rejected by most historians and physicists. Galina Weinstein at the Center for Einstein Studies at Boston University is a staunch believer in Einstein's genius. She says that based on letters written by both Einstein and his first wife, they didn't work together on anything relating to physics. Instead, Mileva Maric was more like a confidant who Einstein talked to and bounced ideas off of. Number 5. Thomas Watson. He was one of the first great businessmen in the USA. He was born in 1874 in New York, had his first job selling pianos and sewing machines door to door, and worked his way up to the top. He eventually became the general manager of the computing tabulating recording company. This was a business that dealt with things like time clocks and punch cards. They also dealt with new technology that could weigh food and calculate the price. This was very cutting-edge stuff back in the early 1900s. In 1924, Thomas Watson had taken over the company. He renamed it International Business Machines, or IBM. Watson agreed to make digital calculating machines in 1938, which would become desktop computers. But here comes the dark side. During World War II, Thomas Watson doubled IBM's employees to about 22,000 people. They worked extremely hard to provide war materials to the United States. IBM was the only company in the world that could make computation machines capable of aiding the military in complicated logistic decisions. But they were also supplying these same crucial computation machines to the enemy. Number 4. Aristotle. Aristotle was a curious man with some pretty bad ideas. He loved physics, chemistry, the study of the stars, and even biology. One thing he hated was women. Aristotle made some really odd claims about women during his life. He said women have fewer teeth than men. He also said that when compared to men, women are immature, deformed, and even monstrous. He even believed men had hotter blood than women for some strange reason. Aristotle's bad ideas kept going on and on. Aristotle once wrote that prisoners of war certainly don't believe in being enslaved just because they were on the losing side of the battle. But he also argued that some people were naturally born to be slaves. But it wasn't a race issue, it was a brain issue. Aristotle said that anyone who willingly submits and takes orders, and anyone not smart enough to think for themselves, should just be a slave and leave the thinking to more advanced men. He called these machine people, no better than animals. Number 3. Oliver Cromwell. The BBC did a poll asking citizens who the greatest Briton of the second millennium was, and Oliver Cromwell came in third. And in the 150 biographies that have been published over the past 100 years, Cromwell is almost always shown in a favourable light. Cromwell was an English general who led the armies of the Parliament of England in the English Civil War. He then ruled the British Isles as Lord Protector between 1653 and 1658. Basically, he was the unofficial king and lord of the British Isles. One of the biggest things about Cromwell was that he hated Irish Catholics. When he went to Ireland, he had a mission to wipe out as many of the Irish Catholics as he could. Number 2. Walt Disney. Walt Disney was born in the year 1901, the second year of the 20th century. Over the next 65 years, he grew to be a business tycoon and a huge name in the film industry. But Disney wasn't as benevolent as his image would make him appear. In 1928, Walt Disney sketched a mouse, the very mouse that would become the face of Disney. Its name was Mortimer Mouse. Imagine how different things would have been if Disney had actually named the mouse Mortimer instead of Mickey. It wasn't until he showed the sketch to his wife that she could talk him out of it. His wife Lily said Mortimer was too pompous of a name, and that Mickey was cuter. While Disney was a pioneering and prosperous man, he was also the subject of many controversies. Even though he had many critics, Disney also had numerous supporters who said he was not anti-Semitic or racist. The argument about Disney's suspected discrimination and racism continues to this day. Number 1. Che Guevara. Che Guevara's face is everywhere these days, even though quite a few people don't even know his name. The iconic Argentine Marxist and revolutionary is a big deal to socialists and was definitely one of the most influential humans at the end of the 20th century. The picture you see of him on the t-shirts is considered one of the most famous photographs in the entire world. In 1954, he met Fidel Castro in Mexico and joined his rebellion in Cuba. Fidel won the rebellion and became the president of Cuba, and together with Che, declared Cuba a communist country. In 1967, he was captured by Bolivian soldiers. Most people make Che Guevara out to be a kind of anti-hero, a great revolutionary who helped liberate Cuba. But he was actually a very evil person. He created the first ever correction work camp in Cuba, which was the Cuban version of a Soviet gulag.